I'm Miko Pawlikowski, and this is HockeyStick. Today we're talking about how AI is reshaping medical image analysis. If you ever had to use an X-ray, MRI, or ultrasound, today is the day you actually learn how they work, and also how using AI has the potential to literally save lives. I'm joined by Anuradha Kar, researcher at the Institut Pasteur in Paris, working on deep learning applications in drug discovery. Before this, she worked at the Paris Brain Institute on applying deep learning models to understanding Alzheimer's disease, and at École Normale Supérieure de Lyon on deep learning-based analysis of 3D bioimage datasets. Welcome to this episode, and thank you for flying HockeyStick. So, what does a deep learning-assisted drug discovery researcher do?
We design drugs. So the chemical space, the world of molecules or chemical compounds is huge. And if you want to design a drug, which is a medicine that we all use, that's so much part of our life, in order to design a new drug for something, a new disease or something, you need to find compounds that would act with the desired biological effect. So in the whole chemical space, you need to find a molecule that has biological significance with respect to a certain medical condition, as well as you need to find another molecule which will interact with the first one. The first one is called a target, and the second one is the drug. So in the whole process, you have this target and drug discovery or finding from all the range of chemical compounds that you have. And within that, I work in a specific area, although I'm new to this field. I have been working since last year, but I'm quite thrilled by this field. So I worked with binding site identification. That's my current project. That is where a drug molecule will bind with the target molecule to identify them with high specificity, high accuracy using deep learning.
Okay, so to explain that to a 5-year-old software engineer, what does it mean for molecules to be binding? What I'm picturing is back from school where I was drawing the different molecules that had these shapes, and I was picturing things holding on to each other.
I'm new to this field, but so far my understanding is like a lock and key mechanism. So once they have bound to each other, the target and its drug, they act in a proper pharmacological way to produce the desired effect. So it's like a lock and key mechanism.
You use the word discovery rather than design or building. Does that imply that you're searching for a needle in a haystack kind of situation?
Pretty much. Absolutely. It's absolutely what you said. It's needle in a haystack. So all the chemical compounds that you can imagine, and then trying to find a molecule that suits your biological question at hand. So that's the whole concept. I was told that there are millions of compounds. So the idea is to find the right one. The drug design is another field. So you design molecules, design compounds to suit your needs.
And how did you end up doing this? Can you tell us a little bit about your journey?
So I did my master's from the University of Calcutta, which is eastern part of India. And there I won a fellowship from the Indian Space Research Organization to work on upper atmospheric phenomena using radar data. So after that, I was very much interested in remote sensing science and associated fields. So I moved to Germany and I worked at the Max Planck Institute and German Aerospace, working on atmospheric related research. Then I found a PhD position, a nice one, in Ireland, and it was on computational imaging. It was on developing technologies for consumer devices like smartphones, AR, VR systems, assisted driving applications. So it seemed very exciting to me. So I moved to Ireland. I did my PhD from the University of Galway. It's now called the University of Galway. Before it was National University of Ireland, Galway. So from the University of Galway, I did my PhD. So that was in 2019. I completed my PhD. So that was in developing techniques for human-computer interaction, where I was working with eye tracking. So eye tracking and how they're used, how they can be evaluated. So the research problem was about identifying the sources of errors or anomalies in this kind of systems, because without them, you cannot really put a technology in a consumer device which will reach out to millions. You need to be certain that they're working perfectly. So it was like a quality evaluation protocol development. And after I got introduced to machine learning and deep learning algorithms, because that was the time of 2015, 16, when TensorFlow was coming up, and it was the early years of TensorFlow, PyTorch, and our group in Ireland, we focused completely on deep learning and machine learning techniques for computational imaging. That's how I got introduced into AI in the very early budding days when we had simple models, good old days. After my PhD, this was a question like which field I would like to proceed. And I realized that, yes, AI is a field that is probably going to stay for a while, at least my lifetime. So it was in a very beginning stage at that time, I would say like semi-maturing, or it's not mature yet. This is one technology that is probably going to last for a bit. So I probably can make a career in it. And so that was my choice to get into artificial intelligence, followed by a postdoc in ENS Lyon. So that's when I moved to France, where I am now. So I moved to ENS Lyon to work in collaboration with a project where, again, the data I was working with changed completely. So this was microscopy data taken from plants. I had the concepts of AI algorithms, so that was the skill set I was bringing, but the data was completely different from what I have ever used. This was a collaboration between the French National Organization Digital Science and Technology, which we call INRIA in France, and another national organization on environment and food and agriculture, which we call INRAE. So this was a collaboration happening in Lyon. In France, this is the system of collaborations between multiple institutes, so you have to explain and cite all of them. So this was on plant microscopy data, and again, I was working with deep learning. After that finished, I got a position in Paris Brain Institute, where again the data changed. So this was histopathology data, brain tissue data to identify occurrence of Alzheimer's disease. Then again, I was bringing the AI skill set that I developed in Lyon. So I could transfer the skills, but I was facing a completely new kind of data. So after that finished, I got this position in Pasteur. So here I am right now, again facing a different kind of data. I totally can use my skills that I have developed in the past few years on deep learning.
You've done a lot of interesting things and a lot of different things, from atmospheric research all the way to imagery in medical science, which is pretty great. I love Lyon. I actually did my master's in Grenoble at Ensumac, so not too far away.
Lyon was beautiful. I mean, it is beautiful. That's where I could forget my sorrows of leaving Galway, because Galway was in the west of Ireland, beautiful city. And it was like a home away from home, so it was hard to leave.
There's a lot of things that I would like to talk to you about, but today let's focus on the medical imaging modalities. A lot of people listening to this will be coming from software engineering background, so their experience with things like X-rays and MRIs will probably be limited to being on the receiving end of that. Oh, I broke my leg, or my shoulder hurts. Can you maybe first tell us a little bit about the basic modalities in medical imaging, what they do, where they come from, what they're good for, and why does, a doctor say you need an MRI?
Why? Because biomedical imaging allows you to have a visual representation of the internal structures of your body, and if there is something wrong, to detect it with as much precision as possible. So the key modalities, I would say, that are mostly used are, of course, X-ray. I have done probably at least one X-ray in our lives. So the X-ray, it's for hard parts of the body, that is the bones. It's exclusively for bone imaging, you can say. And then we have the CT, which is basically the X-ray, but it's done in like a 360-degree scan. So slices of image are taken at all different angles around 360 degrees, and they are reconstructed. Again, it's for hard tissues like bone tissues. Then we have MRI. MRI works in a completely different physical concept. It stands for magnetic resonance imaging because it uses a high magnetic field, and it's more tailored for soft tissues. For example, the brain, the spinal cord, the breast tissues, and the heart, and also like tissues in the abdomen. So it's tailored for soft tissues. If anybody wants like a scan of their brain, for example, growth of tumor, even like neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, they would be suggested an MRI. And the others are like ultrasound, then even optical imaging, that is microscopy, which I worked with during one of my research positions, which is like to image tissues. This is also an imaging modality. But for biomedical, we mostly stick to the X-ray, CT, MRI, and ultrasound. The most common ones.
Okay. Can we go a level lower? I guess an engineer in me has always wondered how these things actually work. And I know that for X-ray, they say you shouldn't have too many
Yeah.
because it can damage. So I guess
Yes.
an X-ray makes sense to me, but the other ones seem to be a bit more complicated to me. How does an MRI actually
Yeah.
work?
Yes. So the MRI, what it does, it's about orientation of hydrogen molecules in tissues that contain water. So at first, there is a very high degree of magnetic field that is used to align the hydrogen atoms that are in the tissues in a certain direction. So after alignment, radio frequency pulse is applied so that the orientation of these hydrogen molecules, they change a bit. And when the pulse stops, then the molecules start to come back to their original orientations. And they release a burst of energy, which is actually the signal. And then this is done in slices. So as you can imagine, this is a two-dimensional thing. And again, done around 360 degrees. And then the signal that is emitting from these displaced molecules, these are then imaged back and then they are reconstructed. So reconstruction is a big part in MRI to get the full picture of the thing that you are imaging, for example, brain tissue.
So that big donut, that's to create the magnetic field to align the hydrogen atoms. Did I get that right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
That's a magnet.
Oh.
That's a magnet. It's a high 1-2 Tesla magnets that induces this magnetic field to align the molecules.
That sounds really futuristic. Oh, let us align your hydrogen atoms in your tissue so that we can see what it looks like. Sounds like something from science fiction. I'm glad that we have that kind of technology. What about the ultrasound, USG? That seems to have a similar kind of modality. You can see the soft tissues, but I'm guessing it works differently, right?
It's the sonar principle. So it's ultra high frequency waves that are projected in the area to be mapped and they are reflected back and image the reflected signal based on the, I can say, amplitude of the signal that is reflected back, exactly in the principle of sonar, ultra high frequency sound.
So if you've got a pregnant woman and we're basically doing a sonar on her belly to see what's reflecting. Yeah. Is there anything that doesn't show on ultrasound?
If there is something that doesn't reflect sound waves and instead absorbs it, then this could be a problem. Maybe soft tissues, blood vessels. Of course, you cannot image blood vessels or very soft tissues and veins and stuff like that with ultrasound because they don't have the reflective property. So you get a very rough outline of the structure.
And it also doesn't affect the tissues too much, right? If you went and tried to ultrasound someone's head, that would just be all reflected by the skull, right? You wouldn't be able to see much.
Yes, pretty much. Because a whole reflecting agent is something that is outside, that's not inside.
Yeah, exactly.
So you will pretty much be getting the outer skull image.
So this is a very good intro, and that gives me so much more information. Next time I break a leg or twist an ankle, I'm going to be like, oh, I know what this is doing. The next thing I want to make sure I understand is, because for me, it makes complete sense to use AI on this medical image analysis, but I'm not sure how that actually works and whether this is the kind of hockey stick moment for analyzing these medical images the way that I think it is. So how does the AI come into play now with all these medical images you can get?
So imagine a hospital that has all these imaging setups there. And then maybe per day there are like 1,000 scans of X-ray. For example, during the COVID times, it was, imagine like 10,000 scans being done per day just to detect if there is COVID or not. Now, the next thing is that there will be a radiologist who will be going through each scan, trying to detect what is there, or if there's something, what type is it. So average return times of this kind of scan analysis, as we can see experiences, an MRI till now, it takes around 3, 4 to 5 days, depending on the volume of patients that you are handling. And sometimes, especially during COVID, what we saw is that we cannot delay treatments because the COVID was detected at a very late stage. And that's when everything got fatal. None of the medicines would work and the patient just expired. There's no other way to handle it. What we need is a very quick turnaround time and a very quick understanding of the disease. And this is where AI steps in. If all these scans from all these patients can be analyzed automatically, human intervention into medical image analysis, they are very prone to individual errors because depending on the efficiency, depending on the workload of a practitioner or a clinician, it's a very variable parameter, the quality of analysis. And so imagine like a clinic having AI-based X-ray analysis software, then all the scans you have, you can get the report from the scans, like whether somebody has COVID or pneumonia or something within a day. And so you can imagine how much faster it will progress the treatment and how many lives it can save. Because AI has this capability, once it is trained with sufficient amount of data, it can generalize to do predictions on as much data as you can provide. And the inference times are very small compared to a human analyzing all the data manually. So this fast analysis, this ability to handle large data sets, which typically you get in clinics, hospitals, these are the factors which are bringing in AI as a hockey stick moment. There is a caveat that AI is not supposed to replace humans. It is supposed to aid in their work. So the hockey stick moment, I would say, is this AI stepping in biomedical image analysis.
I think I buy this argument, the scale argument of we no longer are exposed to problems like shortages of doctors and their tiredness and unable to handle the volume of the images. But it's not entirely clear to me is whether the image that the AI would be looking at is sufficient for it to make a diagnosis without all the experience that the doctor comes with, because they don't just look at the data, right? They don't just look at the image. They look at a patient as a whole, and they're guessing a lot of things that give them hints. Are we at the stage where the models are sufficiently accurate that they're actually comparable to a well-trained doctor?
I would say the thing that you mentioned about they look at different things. When a trained doctor look at a scan, all their years of experience and training comes to their mind to come to a decision. This has a parallel with AI because AI, depending on how well it is trained, which is a big question till now, is how do you train your models to be sufficient? Is any training sufficient to acquire the level of expertise or experience that a human has? So far, it's difficult to specify theoretically that what is a knowledge level of AI models. But from practice, when you apply an AI model on a scan and you ask it, okay, tell me if this has a tumor or not, the accuracy is very high. And, as we have seen, it can be close to 95% onwards. So that's a very sufficiently high accuracy. There are instances when a human is confused because humans are prone to errors and there is confusion, where a human could not detect a tumor or ideally delineate it, like where are the boundaries, an AI model could. So from practice, this is the surprising things that have come up that has motivated people to invest more in this field, is that AI models have this ability because of the way they are trained or the amount of data with which they are being trained and the techniques with which they are being trained. They are almost reaching human level precision, and with the added benefit that they don't get tired. So you can use the model throughout the day. It won't ask for coffee. It would keep working. It won't be fatigued. So that's an added advantage. Because clinician fatigue is an important thing, because if a person is tired, they might even overlook something, which an AI probably won't if its training is done pretty well.
What stage are we at with these models? Is this research stage where we're testing them, or is it commercially available at the moment?
That's another good thing. If you look into the web pages of companies like Siemens, Philips, IBM, which are like leaders in healthcare electronics providers, they are the ones who make the scanners actually. Like for example, Siemens, they have a whole AI-based workflow available for marketing. So this is something that I really like about this field, is that what we are developing today, in a couple of years, that could be in a device. In some fields, you develop things, but it takes 10 years or even more to get a real utility application from it. But in case of AI for medical imaging, at least, we see that it's already in devices, commercial devices.
So this is basically being marketed as an equivalent of what we have for coding, which is the Copilot style thing, right? That you have this AI that accompanies you and makes suggestions, can do things,
Absolutely.
but you're ultimately responsible for making the final calls,
Yes.
right? So it's not end-to-end, but a tool that helps, right?
Yes, it's
Okay.
pretty much human in the know. At this stage, it's best like that because AI makes a suggestion, then the human who we trust actually and who can be held accountable, they go through the AI suggestions and then together they take the final decision. That is the current stage.
Okay, so someone who has the actual massive MRI machine, not only is it going to spit out the imagery, it's also going to give you a potential diagnosis, right?
Absolutely.
And how long has it been?
So I would say like at least 2 years or so. It hasn't gone back very much because these AI models have started gaining this level of accuracy since 2020. Before that, they were very research grade, I would say. The AlexNets, VGGs, ResNets that we had. But they have been like trained, tuned, and like the models, I can bring in my Manning experience a bit now because the models that I used in 2019 or 2020 for X-ray analysis, the accuracy that they had, and the ones that the pre-training is on the same ImageNet, the ImageNet database is bigger. Now they are getting far better accuracy, even with transfer learning. So the transfer learning from 2020, I found was not as good as the transfer learning qualities we have now. I can say in the last 2-3 years, when the AI models started showing promise and that they are reliable enough to be put in consumer devices. I'm not advertising a company here, but I just saw an example that Siemens has a full AI-based workflow starting from patient record. And okay, this moves a bit away from medical imaging, but patient record analysis, referral systems are based on AI. Then when a patient comes in and they're positioned in, for example, an MRI scanner, the positioning orientation is done using AI. Then after the capture, the post-processing, the reconstruction is done with AI. And finally, the identification of potential tumor or some disabilities, diseases, they are again done with AI. So it's like a complete AI workflow that they have it on their website. So as available. So that's great.
If you were to plot a graph of development from not usable to where it is today, what would it look like? Would it be a straight line? Would it be exponential growth? Would it be a step function where it was basically nothing and then boom, one day we got to the point where it looks like? What would it look like?
I would say it had an exponential growth because it started out very research grade and people were starting to see that, okay, it works. But then healthcare is such a sensitive field. You can't really bring everything research grade to a product. But then with the increasing efficiency, we saw like an exponential growth in the number of research papers that were published and also the amount of commercialization that was done with this field. Like there are so many companies, you will see so many companies starting from levels like Siemens, IBM, Philips, to very young companies, I would say, like startups. All of them are involved in this. The numbers have grown exponentially. I would say from 2018 onwards, it's started seeing this. And within this, people have built the systems. They are in market. The people are relying on them. So that's a huge thing. Like even internet didn't get this level of acceptance or I would say propaganda when it was first there.
Propaganda being the key word here. I think we all know what you're talking about. Where do you see it going? What would be the next step? With all the usual caveats of predictions are hard and all of that. But if you were to make a prediction, what would you expect to happen next in the field of medical imaging and AI?
The first is highly accurate and bias-free predictions, because as much as we do the propaganda about the AI and its qualities, it's super dependent on what you are feeding it. That is the quality of the data. And in biomedical imaging field, the data quality is a big issue. And models have to be designed in ways that they can still, because you probably cannot improve much the quality of data because they are coming from everywhere, where the scans may not be very accurate, but still you are using them for training. So the models have to be designed to cater to this kind of even average quality data and still produce sufficiently accurate outputs. And then there are biases. So there may not be any representations for a certain kind of tumor, but you are asking your model, okay, find me the tumor. So the models, I can say it has to reach a human level of accuracy, perfection, and at the same time maintain precision and consistency. At the same time, they should be free from bias and all that. Although a lot of that is being achieved depending on the type of disease, because MRI caters to some very common type of tumors. But if there is something super rare where you don't have enough data to train models, it's still an issue.
Where does the data come from? One of the reasons why we seem to be having a brand new large language model every other day is because the data is becoming more readily available. We've got better data sets, curated, people are investing money and time into making them better, and they're evolving. And with them, the quality of the resulting models. What does that look like for medical images?
Medical imaging quality could be super variable because they are taken by people who do not have the goal in mind that, okay, I have to produce super high quality data. You can imagine a hospital, imagine a clinic where the main idea is to get the patient, get the scan done, release the patient next. So the quality sometimes could be super, super bad. And they also get into the training set. Maybe there will be a retaking of scans. So the source of biomedical data is absolutely clinics, although there has been some efforts to design synthetic data, but it's not a very good way of doing it. Then there is the question of privacy. What kind of data can hospitals release and which ones they cannot? And how do they release it? So I faced this during one of my projects that all the patients had to be anonymized. Otherwise, there will be a big problem of privacy from the hospital. So any trace of patient data had to be removed before we do any kind of processing. So of course, it comes from clinics and hospitals, but there are all these issues about privacy, quality, these kind of things. They always come up.
Are there any countries that are doing this at a higher level of a whole country, or is it individual hospitals that decide to donate their images in the name of science?
From my experience, I think it's the focus of the individual hospitals because I worked with the histopathology images which were released by a particular hospital in Paris, which were available, but other hospitals may have that data, but they do not have the policy or the inclination to release it. And so the data is very scarce. Even if hospitals have data, they totally may choose to not release them. So it's just a few hospitals who may agree if they have a tie-up with an university, or if they have a tie-up with a research lab, they might choose. But again, the data may stay within the lab rather than being publicly disseminated. So data availability and sufficient amount of privacy concerns, they need to be dealt with in this field because this is patient information going out.
Yeah, definitely. That was exactly what I was thinking. This is not just random text of the internet. This is actually medical data. How do we get from here, from having AI look at images to explainable AI? And what is it?
So this, again, I would say, consider around the years 2020, 2029, the models were performing really good. People were surprised about their qualities. Okay, how can an AI model can classify, identify things at almost a human level? So there was a question, how does this model work? And how are they having such high capabilities of identification, detection? So then people started doubting, is this some voodoo thing happening? We don't trust this because we don't know how it works. We know what's inside. We know the layers. We can even write a differential equation for the whole model. But we still don't know how it is so accurate. So this is when the concept of explainable AI started. And as these AI models started having these kind of public applications where the models are facing the complete society. And society asks questions. So how did you do it? So, yeah, because other than that, the main difficulty of applying AI for real life or practical use cases is that one of the main problems is that they are sometimes black box. Other than very simple models, which we don't even call deep learning models, most deep learning models, they have this black box aspect that we do not understand what they are seeing, what got them to this decision, and how they're working. So this is how the concept of explainable AI started becoming important. And at the moment, because AI is being put in so many public domain applications, this is being a super important field at the moment.
And in the actual medical images domain itself, are there any breakthroughs or important developments that bring us closer to actually having explainable AI and not having that discomfort really of not knowing how this model arrives at the conclusions it does?
There is this concept of attention that kind of like, again, a hockey stick movement for deep learning models was this attention, this mechanism by which you can see where the model is focusing. For example, you were given a chest X-ray. This is something, again, I covered in my Manning first project series with my Manning publications. So this, we had X-rays which had signs of COVID. Some had signs of COVID, some were clear. And of course, then we had used an AI model like a VGG16 model to do a classification of COVID versus no COVID. So it gave a result. And then we applied this technique called GradCam. It's gradient weighted activation mapping. It uses the gradients within the model to create a set of weights within the image of what the AI model focuses on. And then when you use this GradCam on an image, that what are the salient areas within the image that helped it in its classification decision. And then you realize, okay, it's actually focusing on the cloudy areas, which a doctor would focus on if they say that, okay, this is a COVID image because of these cloudy regions within the chest region. So this is where we saw that, okay, explainable AI does have an application in medical imaging, and it's actually helping doctors to take decisions and confirm that the AI predictions are actually valid.
This will be a beautiful day when we finally figure it out. Or maybe we won't, because I guess when we're looking at human brain and people are saying, oh, this is the area of the brain does this or does that because it's activated where
Absolutely.
a lot of people look at set things, then it turns out that for people who, like, for example, lose a part of the brain, the other part of the brain can pick it up. And now all of a sudden, that's a different area there. So I think we've got ways to go, but it is encouraging to at least be able to do a similar thing that we do to a brain to see, oh, like this area is looking at the cloudy bit here. Okay, so we're going to expect developments there and hope for the best. We mentioned Manning and your live projects, and I think for a lot of people who listen to this, they'll be familiar with Manning.com, the publisher, but books. What's a live project and why is it a good idea to try one out?
So this was my question in 2020 when Manning reached out to me and said that we have this concept of live projects, and these are hands-on training core materials. I would say I would distinguish it from a course or a MOOC because these are like hands-on training resources, I would call them. These are actually a set of projects like you will find if somebody joins a company, they will be assigned to a project and they will be assigned a set of goals or milestones to achieve and to produce solutions for some problems or issues. So this is how the life projects work. They have a structure which gives the participants a set of milestones that they have to implement. We call them implementation. Implement is basically finding a coding solution for a given problem. They are free to adopt anyway, although as an author, I will provide them with a final solution or like a test trial solution. They can always consult it. They are encouraged not to. So I have to provide them the solution. I have to provide them with partial solutions, hints, so that they are helped in a semi-mentored way to find the solution. What I really liked is that this is how in a real world setting, like in a company or in a research project, this is how we learn coding. We are given a problem and we are asked, okay, write a script to implement this or solve this. This is exactly what is done in a life project. I would define a problem. I would even set up a scenario. Imagine you are an engineer in a company and you are assigned in this team, you have this project, and you are asked to build a computer vision algorithm to detect tumor in the brain. And these are some key guidelines like, okay, you will be using transformers, this model, and you will train this model, you will run inference, you will see the accuracy and tune it until you get sufficient accuracy. This is how it goes. So ideally, they should not see my solutions, but if at all you're unable, the participants, most of the time they come up with super good solutions. So that's like a playground. You can come up with any different solution. It's very hands-on learning of coding and concepts.
Is it all self-paced, or is there an interactive element with others in the class and with you as a teacher?
It's like we said, there's a suggestive time limit that ideally each project is like 3 to 5 hours. But I think it's best if participants take the time to explore, use this opportunity to explore, talk to others. So there's a project dashboard where participants can interact with each other. And I am also the mentor for the project. So they can write to me, they can request like a session with me, and then I would be able to talk to them. So yeah, they are free to talk to other participants, and at the same time, they are given access to various Manning books. So they can consult books and any online resource they can find, but they need to implement a certain set of solutions.
That sounds very interesting. We should all probably try one. Anuradha has 2 of them. Would you like to talk us through the 2 courses that you've published?
Of course. So the first one, this one, I was approached by Manning in 2020. That was the COVID time. We were in COVID. The obvious topic, I thought, okay, let me build the project. And they gave me whole liberty to design a project around a theme. Of course, I would love to talk about the process, actually, how the life project is built from an idea to a final series. So I was asked to give a brief outline of the concept of the whole series, how many projects it will have, what the projects would cover, what techniques and what end goals. The first project was to use deep learning models and use with 2 biomedical imaging modalities, the X-ray and the CT. Use 2 different models, the VGG16 and ResLet, which were current at that time, very impactful. And then 2 different training strategies. One is training from scratch, and the other is training with transfer learning. So all this was included in the first project series. So the process, how you develop this in close collaboration with Manning, is that you propose this series and its details. It goes through an extensive review, which I really like, because there are industry leaders looking at your concept. And if it passes through the reviews, then it gets approved by the editor to go ahead. And then you start the implementations of your concepts and provide them with the solutions. And then a lot of beta testers, like around 20, would test your code to see if it works, if it's functional, if every aspect of your project makes sense. And then will be the final copy editing and before publication. So that was my first project series. That was in 2020.
Okay. And then they contacted you again and they were like, come back, do another one.
It was the other way around. I wrote to them. Because I was working at the Paris Brain Institute and my colleagues were working with MRIs, and before it was COVID, which was a big news around, and now it was Transformers, which was like a super popular model, and it's again gaining popularity in medical imaging. So I'm like, is this a high time to propose something hands-on? And then there is Hugging Face. So another of my boosts came from Hugging Face. I attended one tech meetup in Paris, and it was at Hugging Face. And it was like, oh, this is an amazing company. What do they do? And then I saw they actually write amazing libraries and transformers. Well, this transformer model architecture is in one of their libraries. Super well documented, super user-friendly. So I'm like, okay, Hugging Face is in Paris. I'm in Paris and I'm working with MRI. So let me put all this together. So that's how what went in. I proposed that idea to the editor. Who said, okay, transformers are super new at the moment and relevant. So let's go ahead with this. So that's how it started.
That one's called Transformers and Explainable AI for Computer Vision. Yeah. Published just this year.
So yes, now that it's done, it was 1 year of very intense work. I really thank the teams of Manning who kept the pace on, who kept me in like a time schedule. At the same time, we experimented so much within the projects that it took 1 year almost to get this finally published. Now that it is done, I'm super happy. And then the next thing would be to develop even more courses for, I would say, AI education and hands-on AI courses for training, like young graduates to any levels. So this could go to any levels. If somebody is a super senior software developer, but they want to delve into AI and stuff, to design courses for them and hands-on, absolutely. So this is what I'm trying to find right now. Maybe approach for funding to develop such courses and also find collaborators for such courses like that. I would stick to AI. Of course, one of my most interesting domains is healthcare. So AI for healthcare would be a target domain, but I'm open to AI for other fields as well. Just to educate the new generation, because this is going to be essential for our times to come.
For anybody listening and wanting to join or help out to make that a reality, find on Anuradha Kar on LinkedIn and reach out. What about your research? What focuses are you foreseeing as the next areas for you?
At the moment, I'm focusing on the drug discovery aspect, and I'm just fascinated how big this field is. There are so many application areas for AI. AI is in all steps of drug discovery. So for now, I would like to focus on AI-based drug discovery and try out some really good new models. And I was thrilled to see new deep learning models are being developed in this field. And then they are going to other fields like consumer electronics and all that. So this is, I can say, like a hub of AI research, that this drug discovery field. So yeah, this field is super potent. And so I would like to learn more about this field, work more. At the same time, I want to also keep my work on imaging, because computational imaging is one of my favorite areas, although this comes within drug discovery. So I'm not very far away from computer vision, actually. The models are quite the same, just the applications are slightly different. So yeah, I would like to keep working in AI for healthcare and see if there are new use cases coming up. So what I try to do is to periodically see if something has a potential, to see if we can work something on that, but to keep the core competency in AI models.
I was going to ask you earlier, but I forgot. So let me ask now. I remember was it AlphaFold? That was folding proteins, and that sounded very impressive.
Yes.
I'm not entirely sure what folding proteins actually means. I was hoping that maybe you could explain to me. But a lot of people I spoke to saw it as this kind of breakthrough moment where it proved that you can use this deep learning models efficiently and do things that just weren't practical before for the sheer scale of it, and cheaply too. Is that an accurate representation of what happened?
Yes, truly. AlphaFold, as per my knowledge, again, I'm new to this field, as per my knowledge, it predicts structures based on sequences. So this is something revolutionary, I would say, because as I see now, there is one approach in this research is to use protein sequences, and the other, which is where my lab works, is the structural biology, is to work with structures. So AlphaFold pretty much bridged the gap between them with AI model. And it's Google DeepMind, so there are still errors in the predictions, but that this is possible was brought forward by AlphaFold. So yeah, that was quite a breakthrough.
If you were to explain again to a 5-year-old software engineer, why is it such a big deal? Why can't we just brute force all the combinations and figure out all these proteins? Because the numbers were high, but they weren't, I think it was 200 million proteins that they predicted. Why is it impossible to do the good old-fashioned brute force way?
As per my knowledge, I would say because of the sheer size of the data you are dealing with. Hand creation of structures or manual creation of structures is a difficult job because the chemical space is huge. That would be my understanding of the thing. Because for this, we need to dig deeper into what was done before AlphaFold came in and said that, okay, we solved the big problem. As far as I understand, it's like a huge amount of data that they have used that is beyond human comprehension. Because as I have read in papers, until 90s, some numbers of hundreds, in the order of 100 proteins were structured like this. But then AlphaFold came and you have the whole library.
Anuradha, last question for you. A lot of especially younger people, graduates who may be finishing their course in computer science or software engineering or some similar field to that, they're basically asking themselves the same question, all of them. Should I specialize in AI? Or should I go and find one of these niches where AI seems to be just doing massive strides? Would you recommend the field that you're currently focusing on, AI in particular deep learning for medical care and medical imaging, as a career path?
It's totally right that this is quite niche, because that's what our editor also said. When I proposed, it was all on MRIs, and the editor at Manning, he suggested that can we diversify a bit? So then that's how the third project, it's on object detection. Then I use a completely different data set, and it's on like construction and machinery, fault identification, like that. So definitely getting into a niche area has its advantages and disadvantages. That is, you learn very deep about a subject, and you can totally have a very thorough understanding of the topic. You're an expert on the topic. But again, things are really changing. So it's very important to diversify and increase your knowledge base to other fields, learn to have an idea about data fusion. In a few years, I'm sure health record data would be integrated with these medical imaging modalities in some form, because you have to have patient information in text format as well as the imaging data available. Together, to anyone graduating, I would say expand your skill set, but be very basic. So if somebody wants a career in AI, I will ask them to first master the basics of neural networks and how it works, the basics of tuning, hyperparameters, and take the most popular MOOCs by professors who clear your basics about how models are trained, what are the errors, what are these overfitting, underfitting. Then choose your area, and even keep expanding your knowledge base so that you can switch from one area to the other. If today you are working with a medical imaging, tomorrow you can switch to healthcare records, because the concepts would vary a bit, but you can still adjust. I would suggest people to be a bit flexible. It's also interesting that you can explore different areas and increase your skill sets. So in that way, it's also good. But the core fundamental understanding of models and how they work, how they are trained, should be very clear.
Love that answer. And I think this is one of the things that I love so much about software, is that you can go into all these subdomains and become an expert in all kinds of weird things with the same basic original education and tool set. And that is super exciting.
Yep,
if you're training for a doctor and you spend 10 years, it's a little bit harder to move into a different field. However, as a software person, you can just do that, and nobody bats an eye. Life hack.
You have the option to be dynamic and learn different applications of even the same model. Like this model UNED that was proposed in 2015 is still doing good in deep learning, but it has found so many different application areas. You can travel any field with that. But you just understand the model properly and implement it properly in code, and you just travel with it.
Anuradha, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, and thank you so much for sharing. I learned quite a lot, and I hope to see you again.
Thank you so much. It's been amazing.